Morning everybody, on a lovely sunny day in the Rhondda again. I just want to share with you this morning something that I think is very important at this time. We're living in a time of change where everything is changing rapidly, day by day, as we get reports from our government and other parts of the world. We're noticing the change that's happening in our society. I want to look at something in the book of Ephesians that Paul wrote this morning, and he says that he's a steward of God's grace. Now, you might have come across that word grace in that hymn, Amazing Grace. And what does it mean? It means the favour of God. It means something we don't deserve. And so Paul is saying he's a steward of God's grace. And why he's saying that is because in his letter to the church at Ephesus, he says he's a minister of God's grace. And he says this, "To me, though I am the very least of the saints, this grace was given to me." Now, Paul was somebody that persecuted Christians. He was somebody that put them in prison, agreed to their deaths. And suddenly on the road to Damascus, when he was going to find more Christians and put them in prison, he had a life-changing experience. He met Jesus. And that experience, that revelation, changed his life. As I said a moment ago, we're talking about change in our world, and how things have never been like this before. And Paul had that experience. Something happened to him that was something he'd never experienced before. And he says that because of that moment in his life, everything changed. And because of the favour of God, he couldn't believe that God could love him so much, that Jesus could forgive him so much. A man who put Christians to death could be forgiven. That whatever the past was like, that didn't matter. He was swiped out. Because Jesus died on the cross, Jesus met him. The risen Jesus met him, and he was transformed. And he became one of the greatest Christians this world has ever seen. Because of that one moment in his life. That change took place in an instant, in a moment. And so, this morning, as I said, in this world of flux and change, we can discover this wonderful Jesus who can help us in this change and overcome this change and be with us in our anxiety and panic and fear and crisis. You know, God's not surprised by crisis because God knows the end from the beginning. And God knew everything about Paul, and yet he forgave him incredibly. And because of what happened to Paul, he's a steward, it says, of God's grace. You've come across a steward, haven't you? Someone on an aeroplane who's looked after you. We call them flight attendants or cabin crew today. But they're stewards. They meet our every needs. They're gracious to us and good to us. And Paul was a steward like that. He spent his life dispensing grace. He went out of his way to show the love of Jesus and to show that Jesus can forgive you and reconcile you and bring you back and help you. So Paul spent his whole life, even though he felt he was the least of all the saints, the one that didn't deserve it, the one that didn't deserve anything. And that song, Amazing Grace, that I mentioned earlier on, was written by a man called John Newton, a sea captain who spent his life transporting slaves, cramming them on board his ship and taking them to various parts of the world, particularly to America. And you know, in one moment of time, in a terrible storm, he said, "God, if you can bring me through this, I will serve you." And John Newton was changed. The hard-nosed, tough sea captain became a servant of God, became a preacher, and in fact was part of the group of people with William Wilberforce that helped to abolish slavery many centuries ago. See, the transformation, the change happened because of the risen Jesus. And he's still here today to help us to handle change, to help us to dispense grace and love. So for all of us today, this morning, help us today to be dispensers of grace. Help us, because of the grace that God has shown us and the love and forgiveness he's shown us, to do that to those around us. To show grace and love. Because Jesus wants that. So today, let's remember Paul and how God forgave him and changed him. And ask God to forgive us and change us today and help us to help other people by us being stewards of grace. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow. Lord, I just pray that you would help us today to know your favour and your blessing on our lives. Help us, I pray, to bring favour and blessing to others perhaps by a phone call, perhaps by an act of kindness. Help us in our world of change to be dispensers of grace, to help people, because you have changed us. Help us to change the world. Amen.